Jirex, or at least that's how I think you say it. There's no R. I don't know if it's Jir or Jir, but Jirex. This is a YouTuber who asked me to build his Godzilla build, but smaller, and so I accepted the request, and this is the build. So before talking about anything else, let's talk about the height, because it's always something just to get over quickly. But so if you stand it up all the way, it reaches the 15 brick mark. You can see right there. So it's pretty tall when you stand it up all the way, but from all the pictures and stop motions and videos I've seen, it likes to be leaned forward, more like the legendary Godzilla. So that takes it a lot smaller to about 12 bricks tall. The orange highlights 10. So however you like to prefer it, and its position will change its size massively. Now I have two Technic pins things that I can use right here just to see how long it is. So I'll just count how long these are and tell you once I've counted them. So you'll place 2 here, and it looks like it's about as long as 2. So this looks about 29 to 30 studs long. So that's pretty good actually for the length. As seen here, I'm going to talk about the articulation real quick. So let's do that. So over in the articulation, we're going to start with the head. We have a ball joint to connect the neck, which is exactly like how the build is, and it gives a lot of room to just look around and have some realistic positions. And then for the actual part of the head, that is an inner ball joint, but it's rotated, so it's not nearly as much movement, but it adds just a little more life to the movement of the head. So then that's the head besides the jaw. So then we have the jaw, which is always basic, the same thing. You have a hinge, goes out kind of far, that's all the way. Looks kind of weird, so don't do that. And you just close it, same hinge. And the shoulder has a ball joint here. You can see it swivels, it goes up and down. You can look like you're smacking something a whole bunch of times because it did not do what you wanted to, but the ball joint just fell off. And then, the elbow is loose stud. That's kind of all there is for the arm. Both arms are the exact same. For the legs, there's a ball joint, a real ball joint. It's more accurate to the build. And then the second one's a ball joint as well. They're both the same ball joints, but they give a little bit freedom, a little bit movement. I use a lot of ball joints for this build, which I'm not normally one to do, but the build I was building off of had a lot of ball joints, so I followed that. So both legs are the exact same. And then moving over to the tail, there's a ball joint to connect the tail to the body. Pretty expected, do it all the time. Then a second ball joint, which is not as common, but still did it. It gives a lot of movement. And then a third ball joint, that's just a lot. And then a hinge for the very end. So that gives a lot of articulation for the tail, which is great for posing, not articulation. It's great for posing, stop motion. Let's just talk about scale real quick, because I see this happen a lot. So you can see it next to these builds, because I know you said smaller one, and I don't know if how big it is, but I assume it's around the size of this -1 Godzilla build here. So that would be my guess, of course, but as compared to -1, it looks kind of little. And then you can also compare it to some other monsters like Godzilla Glenn, which is another YouTuber that I've built a build for. So you can see yours is just a little bit bigger. Not by much. I'd assume yours goes up to like this height, so it's probably small. Like the Shin Godzilla here is probably how big yours is. Yeah, so that would be my guess on how big yours is. Shin Godzilla. So you can see it's pretty small in my opinion. I don't know if it's accurate, but. And then for a little bit more of a scale for something else, you see in your minifigures, it's pretty big. So if you want to display it in your things, or you were to have it somewhere, I mean, you can just have it like. It's going to look big and everything. And then a penny, because I see a lot of people use little builds for pennies. It's not a little build, but I mean, you said make one smaller. So, I mean, there's the penny next to it. It's about the size of its mouth. And then next to the phone, you can't really see because I'm using the phone to record, but you can see if I stand the phone up all the way, it goes around the same height. So it's about the size of an iPhone, but I do have a smaller iPhone, so. And let me stop talking about this. Let's talk about the actual build, little details I've added to replicate the actual build I was requested to attempt to make a smaller one for. So starting with, we'll go at the head. That makes sense. So one little thing, I made it a little bit smooth, so it might look a little clean, but your build had a lot of studs around. So that was one thing I did change myself, because I'm just a big fan of it being cleaner. But with the head, you can see I had the 2 cheese slopes, and then I shortened it a bit. So when you face it towards you, you can see the eyes looking directly at you. I think that just looks a little more accurate, and it also makes the head look a little smaller. I had the circle peak to represent the teeth. I did a circle instead of a square because it just looks a little more like teeth in the mouth, and I think that works for me. You can see this piece at the back is meant to represent the cheese soap, whatever it was that was at the actual head. Then on the neck, I had this like piece right here. I don't know what it's called, but this is meant to represent the studs you have on the side of the neck to make the neck look bigger than the head. But I did not want to do too much studs because it would have just looked too big. Then moving on to the hands, there's like nothing really actually here, but you did have like actual fingers, and I don't really do that on larger builds. So here you can see I have the thumb and the two main fingers. And for the stomach and the body, like there's nothing to really talk about. I just went all out with that in my own style. The dorsal fins here are kind of just the exact way I use a lot of cheese slopes to represent it. I don't like the dorsal fins being gray, matching the same colors as skin. I think it should have been lighter gray, or if you can make the skin black and make the dorsal fins this shade of gray, it just would have looked better in my opinion. But with the way it is, it still looks good, like really good. I really like this build. But like what's in here, you can see I have all the studs and little cheese slopes and then snot bricks, I think that's what they're called, to connect them to just make it look like how it did in the actual build, which is something a technique I plan to start using on my future builds. Then over for the tail, you can see I have this snot technique with the brick on the side. I honestly can't tell you what the bricks are called, but that's meant to represent something you have in your build as well, not only because it's practical and makes the build look so much better as it gets to a smaller scale, but you also have your entire tail being with that design, so I followed that design. Moving on to legs, you can see I used cheese slopes here to represent the ones that were actually on the build, and that worked out really well in my opinion. I also left all the ball joints visible because they were like that on most of the places, but the connection for the head and a little bit on the neck and some bits on the tail, but most of it was pretty visible on the body, and just very easy to see, which I kept the design because it does look pretty nice in some situations. I also went completely on my own with the feet because I could not find any pictures that showed this Godzilla, so I kind of just made my own design for the legs here. I will do a how to build video, and I will make an Atonic Puff accessory. I completely forgot about that. I was in the process of making one and just said, nah, not necessary, basically, and just did not do it. So that's something I need to do. So I'll probably have that in the how to build video. But that is pretty much there is to say. But I do have to say, go check out his channel. It's the exact name, Jirex, however you say it. It's a great channel. A lot of amazing stop motions. But that is Jirex in Lego.